the way down over his ears, some hair is
Following
going
day,
to show.
December 8th, he was sentenced.
In the year 1976, 46 years ago, Virgil Presnell was sentenced to death for the murder. Hello and welcome again to the Death Row and Executions channel. I'm Paco Rivera. The next execution scheduled to take place will be Alan Eugene Miller in the state of Alabama on September 22nd. In the year 2000, Miller was tried and convicted and sentenced to death for the murder of 3 men the year before in 1999. Early that morning, he shot 2 men at one location and then drove about 5 miles to shoot a third man at another location about 10 minutes later. Alan Miller has been described by those who knew him as slow. Mentally slow is the word that often appears in reports of interviews. However, there is no indication that he was ever treated for or suffered from anxiety, depression, or any other mental health issue. Discussions about all that began after he was arrested. His defense lawyers had wanted to present a case of innocent by reason of mental disease. A psychiatrist that evaluated Alan Miller, however, did state that Miller did not meet the criteria under Alabama law to be considered insane, and therefore an insanity defense at the time of his trial was not an option. No doubt, however, that the closer we get to Miller's execution date, the more outrage will be heard by anti-death penalty advocates about how Alabama is going to kill, because that's the word that they'll use, kill, not execute, about how Alabama is about to kill a man that is mentally ill, and how the Supreme Court has ruled that executing people with intellectual disabilities violates the Eighth Amendment prohibition against cruel and unusual punishment. Alan Miller was 34 years old at the time of the murders. He was living with his mother, Barbara Miller, in a trailer home in the town of Billingsley, just outside Birmingham. Family, including Alan Miller's mother, neighbors, and friends of the family. I say of the family because Alan Miller himself was a loner that mostly kept to himself and had no friends to speak of, have said that Miller never brought a girl home while growing up and never had a girlfriend that they know of. He was never even seen in the company of a woman. But this does not indicate that Miller was gay, since no one can say he was ever seen intimately close to any man either. However, it is important to keep this in mind because one of the motives for his actions that morning, after his mental condition was evaluated, is believed to be revenge against coworkers that he thought were spreading rumors about him. During the shooting spree, he had said that they were spreading rumors about him, and that's why he shot. Those rumors, Miller believed in his mind, is that he is a homosexual, and that's what set him off. Someone had also mentioned to investigators at the time that Miller was quite angry over other delivery truck drivers at his place of employment getting better routes for making deliveries. Why some routes are better than others, I don't know. But witnesses say he was extremely angry about it and had complained to management about it. A third possible motive may have been that Miller was laid off from his job 2 days before where he shot 2 men. And that at the second location where he killed 1 man, he had been laid off from there about 7 months earlier. So a disgruntled employee element may have also been a factor. Let's have a look at Alan Eugene Miller before I get into the details of the morning that he killed 3 men. Alan Miller was born on January 20th, 1965, so he is now, at this time, 57 years old. He was born in Chicago and later moved to Birmingham, Alabama. It seems his education went well. He attended Midfield High School in Birmingham, but later graduated from Trinity Senior High School in Euless, Texas. So apparently he had lived for a time in Texas before going back to the Birmingham area. It is said that Alan Miller rarely ever spoke. He would never say anything to anyone unless he was spoken to first. So he never initiated a conversation. He was considered friendly, however. Those whom had known him a long time said he was a nice, quiet boy while growing up and was never violent. Now, one neighbor did say that Alan Miller stopped his pickup truck beside him one day while the neighbor was working on a fence. Alan introduced himself and mentioned how they both have the same last name, Miller, and that Alan Miller found that amusing. But approaching others in that manner would almost never occur. It's something that was unheard of with the somewhat antisocial, reclusive manner of Alan Miller. He was known to get into fights later in life. The ones described by those interviewed say it was mostly with coworkers. It's not clear in reports if by fights it was actual fist fights or verbal fights, but he had apparently been fired from at least one job because of that. That fighting appears to stem from Miller's inability to get along with certain people that he worked with. Alan Miller had no criminal history. He had never been in any serious trouble with the law in his life until the day that he killed 3 people. He worked mainly as a truck driver, delivering supplies for the various companies he had been employed with. He had worked for a company called Airgas, a place that sells and delivers oxygen tanks and other medical equipment to hospitals, for about 6 years before he was laid off from there in January of 1999. So while he was known to get into disputes with coworkers, he was capable of holding down a job. On August 5th of the year 1999, soon after sunrise, Alan Miller left his home in Billingsley in his pickup truck and headed out to Ferguson Enterprises, an agency that dealt mostly in the delivery of industrial plumbing and air conditioning supplies, located in Pelham, Alabama, about an hour's drive from Miller's home in Billingsley. Alan Miller's mother, Barbara, who was also up early that morning, had stated that she believed he was headed to work. She hadn't known that he was laid off from there 2 days before, on August the 3rd. Alan Miller parked his pickup truck in the parking lot of Ferguson Enterprises. That place is now known as Ferguson Waterworks. Miller was a delivery truck driver there. After parking his pickup, he went inside with a Glock pistol. At about 7 o'clock that morning, another employee of Ferguson named Johnny Cobb parked his car and approached the door at Ferguson. He had looked around and saw 3 other vehicles parked in the parking lot. He knew those vehicles as belonging to sales manager Christopher Scott Yancy, another belonging to an employee named Lee Holdbrooks, and the third was Alan Miller's pickup truck. As Johnny Cobb was about to open the door, he heard loud noises and what sounded like screaming coming from inside the building. He then opened the door to see what was going on inside. What he saw was Alan Miller walking toward him at the door, pointing a Glock pistol at his face. Alan Miller had said to him, "I'm tired of people starting rumors on me." Johnny Cobb begged for Miller to put his gun down, and Miller replied by saying, "Get out of my way." Cobb ran around to the side of the building and watched as Miller got in his pickup truck and drove away. Johnny Cobb then went inside and found Scott Yancy dead underneath a desk, where it appeared he was trying to hide. And Lee Holdbrooks was dead in a hallway at the end of a long trail of blood, meaning Holdbrooks was slowly dying and bleeding out while trying to get away from Miller. Johnny Cobb called police. They arrived and secured the scene. About 10 minutes after the shootings at Ferguson Enterprise, Alan Miller arrived at Airgas, about 5 miles away, also in the town of Pelham. Miller had been laid off from work there about 7 months before. There were 2 employees inside. One was the manager Andy Adderhold. The other was Terry Jarvis, who had been Alan Miller's supervisor. Alan Miller approached Terry Jarvis and said, "I hear you've been spreading rumors about me." Jarvis then responded, "I have not." At that moment, Miller shot Jarvis several times. The manager, Andy Adderhold, dropped to the floor and remained crouched behind the counter. Alan Miller then walked around to the back of the counter and pointed his gun at Adderhold. Andy Adderhold begged for his life while hearing dying grunting sounds from Terry Jarvis beside him, who was suffering from gunshot wounds. Alan Miller pointed at the main door and told Adderhold to get out. Andy Adderhold stood up and went to the door, still hearing sounds of pain from Terry Jarvis. Once outside, Adderhold heard one more gunshot. He then climbed over a fence to the other side and used a cell phone to call 911. Pelham police units, now all searching for Alan Miller and the pickup truck that he was driving, spotted Miller driving along I-65, the interstate that would take him back home to Billingsley. After a brief chase, Miller was forced over to the side of the road. He got out, but then tried fighting off police trying to handcuff him. He was forcibly subdued and handcuffed. The Glock pistol that he had used to kill 3 men was laying on the passenger seat in the car. Miller's lawyers wanted to say that there were no aggravating circumstances to justify capital punishment, the death penalty, as required in the state of Alabama. Aggravating circumstances in most states mean there had to be another factor leading to the victim's death. For instance, rape or torture or psychological torment or other bodily harm that caused the victim to suffer for a period of time before death. The state of Alabama requires a capital case murder to be, quote, especially heinous, atrocious, or cruel, unquote. Defense lawyers say Miller shot 3 people, killing them, so that aggravating circumstance didn't happen here. A medical examiner testified that Christopher Scott Yancy, who was 28 years old, suffered 3 wounds to his body. It appeared the first shot entered his leg and went into his spine, paralyzing him, as he was trying to hide under a desk. Scott Yancy had a cell phone right beside him, but because of the paralysis, he was unable to use it. It appeared that Miller then stooped under the desk and shot him 2 more times, causing his death. Lee Holdbrooks, age 32 at the time, suffered 6 wounds to his body. Holdbrooks crawled down a hallway for about 25 feet, bleeding out and surely uncertain whether he would live or die. Miller then shot the 6th and final time into Holdbrooks' head. Terry Jarvis, 39 years old, was shot 5 times, 4 times in the chest. A witness at that location heard Jarvis grunting in extreme pain and later heard a final shot that the medical examiner testified was fired into Jarvis's heart, ending his life. The following statements were made in court during trial. It appears all 3 of defendant's victims suffered for a while not only physically, but psychologically. In each instance, there appeared to have been hope for life while they were hurting, only to have their fate sealed by a final shot, execution style. Based upon the facts presented at this trial, these murders were calculated, premeditated, and callous, with utter disregard of human life. The taking of these lives was among the worst in the memory of this court and was well beyond the level of being especially heinous, atrocious, or cruel. In other words, yes, aggravating circumstances did exist. The media has reported recently that Alan Miller put in a request to be executed by nitrogen hypoxia instead of pharmaceutical drugs. With this method of execution, nitrogen hypoxia, a plastic mask is placed over the inmate's mouth and a gas is breathed in, causing death. No state has ever used this method of execution, but Alabama officials have said they plan to put this system in place as an option that death row inmates may choose. The state of Alabama has also said that they have not received the form from Alan Miller requesting that method of execution. So if he did complete that form and turned it in, then it got lost. If you would like to see more of these death row stories, please subscribe so that you are alerted when the next one comes out. I'm Paco Rivera. Bye for now.